Listen to part of a lecture in a sociology class.
To continue our discussion on self-concept, let's turn to the way that self-concept is shaped by cultural values. Clearly, the society in which we are brought up provides a definition of behavior that's desirable or undesirable. A number of important cross-cultural studies suggest that an important factor, a value in which cultures tend to differ, is in regard to their view of individualism versus collectivism. Individualism consists of behaviors that reward personal goals instead of group goals. So a person's identity in such an individualistic culture would be defined by personal attributes like ambition and intelligence, rather than by membership in groups. Conversely, collectivism requires that group goals take precedence, and consequently, a person's identity is defined in terms of the groups in which the person's accepted: an extended family, a tribe, a professional group, a social class, and so on. So, the purpose of education in individualist cultures is to learn how to achieve personal goals, as contrasted with the purpose in collectivistic cultures, which would be to acquire the customs that would allow the person to fit into the group and contribute to it. In an individualistic culture, members of society are encouraged to be self-reliant and competitive. They're rewarded for trying new ways to do things. This contrasts with members of a collectivistic culture who are cooperative and prefer to use traditional methods. Let me tell you about a little experiment. Students from various cultures were asked to choose a pen. They thought they'd be using the pen in the experiment, but the choice was actually the experiment itself. So, they were provided with 1 blue pen and 4 red pens. Now, the American students and most of the European students consistently chose the blue pen. Why do you think they did that?
Because they wanted to be different, to show that they were individuals.
Right. And that makes sense within the context of the culture, which would encourage an independent self-concept. The students who chose the blue pen would perceive themselves as unique and would want to express their individuality by choosing the pen that was different. Okay, so what about the red pens? Most, but not all, of the Asian and Latin American students showed a definite preference for the red pens.
Sure. I mean, they wouldn't like to be seen as different, and that would be more acceptable to the group.
Right again. In fact, some of the students reported that they were behaving in a way that would promote harmony in the group. If they chose a blue pen, perhaps someone else wouldn't like their choice. So, the assumption would be that students from individualistic cultures would choose the blue pen, and those from collectivistic cultures would choose the red pen, for the reasons that we discussed. But I said that most, but not all, of the Asian and Latin American students chose the red pen. Why do you think that some of them chose the blue pen?
Well, in every culture, there are people who don't fit the mold.
True enough. Affluence, education, or urbanization can also influence a person's desire for individualism. Even travel can contribute to changes in perspectives. But there's another larger reason as well. Although it's convenient to think of these two very different orientations to society and ultimately to self-concept as, well, it's nice to put them into separate boxes, but it's really more accurate to think of them as part of a continuum. So a certain culture would be more collective than another culture, but maybe not as collective as a third culture.
So some of the Latin American students, for example, might have been from a country with a culture that was more individualistic, let's say, than another country in Latin America.
Could be. Or one person might have been more connected to family because he or she might have remained in a rural environment where family members lived in close proximity, whereas another person may have moved to a city for a job, let's say, and had less contact with extended family after that. So that person could become more individualistic because of the new circumstances. And then, of course, entire cultures can be in transition for a number of reasons.
I have a question.
Okay.
Do men tend to be more individualistic than women, even within the same culture?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. There are a few interesting studies that indicate a tendency for women to value interdependence in themselves more than men do. And we see that in the way that women relate to friends and family members. In the studies, they tended to promote group interests to a greater degree than men. But a lot more research would have to be done to arrive at any definitive conclusions about that. So I wouldn't want to make too many generalizations.